Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a third-person action-adventure video game developed by Ninja Theory. The story follows Senua, a warrior who arrives at the border of Helheim in a quest to save the soul of her dead lover Dillion from the goddess Hela. Throughout the game, Senua faces harsh and brutal situations, both physically and mentally. Senua from the very start of the game is plagued with voices in her head, each one exhibiting differing thoughts that often argue with each other. Because the game follows a female warrior, feminist concepts and theories can be examined against Hellblade quite effectively, most notably from scholars like Lacan, Halberstam, and Mulvey. Hellblade was created with the idea of analyzing mental illness, most notably psychosis. In an interview, Paul Fletcher, a neuroscientist and psychosis expert at the University of Cambridge, directly speaks about Senua's trauma in the game. To some extent, Senua has always seen the world differently from others, but the idea is that the profound trauma she's experienced has triggered these symptoms. Because of her experiences, Senua has lost touch with the reality of those around her. That's really the formal definition of psychosis. The player is then subjected to these ramblings as well, and with the implementation of binaural audio, the voices seem even more real to the player. In this example, Senua is tasked with lining up several ravens scattered around the area in order to open a door to progress further.
The ravens. They've gone. No. Half of them have gone. They've gone. But where? Oh, ravens. Helping? He's not helping. It's trick. Quiet. I can't think.
Out in the wilds. In the cold winter woods.
Where have they gone?
She no longer felt fit for this world. She almost gave in to the darkness.
Jacques Lacan also explores this idea in the mirror stage as formative. Lacan writes, "I am led, therefore, to regard the function of the mirror stage as a particular case of the function of the imago, which is to establish a relation between the organism and its reality, or, as they say, the Innenwelt and the Umwelt." Even though Lacan's mirror stage identifies with infants breaking away from their mother or primary caregiver and identifying with their own imago or gestalt, the same can be argued for Senua as well. At one point in the game, Senua comes across a giant boulder whose shape resembles the face of her mother, which tells Senua to not be afraid of what's to come.
Senua, you have the sight, just like I do. Once you can see into the underworld and all the souls within it will see you. Don't be afraid when they speak to you. I will always be here to guide you.
Did you see her? That was her mother, Galina. She was a priestess, a healer. She taught Senua to see the weave that binds the world together. And it was beautiful. It was a time before the darkness. But when it did come, it first came for her mother. Senua still sees her face from time to time, hidden in the world. Like she's still watching over her. She misses her so much.
This again can relate to Senua's own Innenwelt and Umwelt. Senua's inner world consists of her thoughts and emotions, not only during the actual plot of the game, but of her past experiences as well. Most notably witnessing her mother being burned alive, and experiencing a plague that wiped out much of Dillion's village, which she believed to be her own fault. Her outer world is composed of her actual surroundings, much of which is often distorted by her psychosis, further fueled by the illusions of El Raven. Because the game focuses on Senua, a female warrior who is on a quest to save her dead male lover, many of Judith Jack Halberstam's points on masculinity within females can certainly be applied to Hellblade. Halberstam writes, "I firmly believe that a sustained examination of female masculinity can make crucial interventions within gender studies, cultural studies, queer studies, and mainstream discussions of gender in general." Within the first several moments of playing the game, the player can easily come to the conclusion that Senua is not your typical female character. The first scene of the game shows Senua rowing a small boat down a bleak and foggy river with tattered clothes and even in the possession of a sheathed sword. Right away, the player realizes Senua is a prime example of female masculinity. Halberstam also provides 2 other examples of approved female masculinity, Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2 and Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. In these films, both Hamilton and Weaver exhibit masculine qualities, such as fighting a dangerous cyborg and battling a terrifying beast, respectively. Both characters behave in a masculine fashion, much like Senua. In Hellblade, we see Senua battle countless creatures with her sword in hand, slicing and dicing until all the enemies in that area have been vanquished. Senua is a prime example of female masculinity at play. While not directly related, comparing Hellblade to Laura Mulvey's points in visual pleasure and narrative cinema raises some interesting aspects as well. Because Hellblade is a video game and Mulvey's argument focuses on cinema, the comparison between them is not as direct, but comparisons can be made nonetheless. Mulvey highlights a woman's to-be-looked-atness, the state at which women are on screen solely to be gazed at by the male audience. Mulvey writes, going far beyond highlighting a woman's to-be-looked-atness, cinema builds the way she is to be looked at into the spectacle itself, playing on the tension between film as controlling the dimension of time and film as controlling the dimension of space. Cinematic codes create a gaze, a world, and an object, thereby producing an illusion cut to the measure of desire. Senua herself is not made to be looked at in the sense Mulvey describes. Yes, the player must look at Senua in order to control her throughout the game, but her appearance is not one that instigates a desirable gaze. The way Senua is designed does not correlate with Mulvey's to-be-looked-atness, even though the player still needs to look at Senua in order to progress. Senua herself is the one who causes her own story to progress, and does not stifle the narrative structure of the game. Again, it's important to note that this comparison between Hellblade and Mulvey's work is indeed indirect, but the comparison can still be considered valid. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a thought-provoking journey into the mind of a troubled young woman, embarking on an expedition filled with terror and death. Senua possesses the characteristics of a strong female character, exhibiting strength and courage to do what she needs to do to complete her task. Examining Senua's journey through the eyes of a feminist perspective certainly adds to the conversation of Hellblade, and can cause players and scholars alike to further research these ideas to gain knowledge within the field of feminist theory.